made him a reporter's reporter, and I can think of no higher tribute.
This is what it looked like on Fort Hood Thursday afternoon after a soldier opened fire on fellow soldiers, killing 12 and injuring 31 more. The suspected shooter is this man, Major Nadal Malik Hassan. Federal officials say Hassan had come to their attention 6 months ago because of internet postings that talked about suicide bombings. Shortly after the shooting happened, an Army spokesman said Hassan was dead, but later the Army reported he was alive and in stable condition, although he had been shot by responding officers.
Major Shabazz, thank you so much for joining us tonight. You knew Major Hassan. Can you tell us about him? What was he like?
So I interviewed him a couple of times for the job. He was very easy to talk to, very laid back, and he shared my vision in taking care of soldiers. One of my visions is making sure the soldiers have an Islamic service on post. He shared that vision and really got into some nice conversations about where he wanted to go with the service itself. Did he seem troubled to you in any way? No, he wasn't really troubled. We had some short conversations about the deployments to Iraq. As you guys know, he was a mental health professional. You know, a lot of people have been pointing tonight to his Muslim faith. He was devout, as I understand it, but would you call him an extremist? Well, an extremist, that would be hard for me to say because I didn't know him to that level. But actually what he did was very extreme. If he acted on his ideology against the military, against the United States, then I would have to say that was an extreme action that he took. But you detected nothing in your rather recent conversations with him that would lead you to believe something like this was possible? Yeah, quite the contrary. Again, I talked to him on 3 or 4 occasions. I talked about the extent of his knowledge about the Islamic religion, and all of it was really pretty fair and balanced.
Senator Graham, let me just kind of cut to the chase here. Do you think that the fact that this man was a Muslim, obviously he was either part of some terrorist plot, and I think most suggestions are that he wasn't. It's looking more and more like he was just sort of a religious nut, and you know, Islam doesn't have a majority, or the Christian religion has its full, you know, full helping of nuts too. But do you think the fact that he was a Muslim may have caused the military to kind of step back and be reluctant to challenge him on some of this stuff for fear that they'd be accused of discrimination or something like that?
But let's don't take this to a level that we should not. Let's don't accuse people of basically giving him a pass because he's a Muslim, because I don't think there's any evidence of that.
نبدأ من آخر المستجدات على الساحة الأمريكية والتمييز العنصري والاضطهاد ضد المسلمين، وذلك الحادث الذي ارتبط بالسيد نضال حسن، وهو طبيب نفسي مسلم من أصل عربي، أردى 13 جنديا قتيلا في قاعدة فورت هود الأمريكية. إلى أي مدى يمكن أن يؤثر ذلك على المسلمين في أمريكا واستهدافهم واضطهادهم؟
كما تعلمون، فمنذ أحداث 11 من سبتمبر في الولايات المتحدة الأمريكية وفي أماكن أخرى من العالم، فإن القوات المناهضة للإسلام قد قوت جهودها وكثفتها لأن تجعل المسلمين لأن تدعو إلى النظر إلى المسلمين على أنهم بربريون وغير متحضرون وأنهم أشرار. هذه محاولة تقوم بها قوى مناهضة للمسلمين، وبعض من أعضاء الجالية اليهودية وكذلك أعضاء من الجالية المسيحية توحدوا لإدانة الإسلام وأن يتحدثوا بشر عن رسولنا محمد عليه الصلاة والسلام، وحتى ذهبوا لأبعد من ذلك ليقولوا بأن المسلمين يعبدون الشيطان.
Bill, we just need to get a grip on this and put it in perspective. Very straightforward. What happened yesterday at Fort Hood was the worst terrorist attack on American soil since 9/11. It was committed by a Muslim fanatic who shouted, "Allah is great," and gunned down 44 unarmed, innocent soldiers and civilians. And our president tells us not to rush to judgment, to wait until all the facts are in. What facts are we waiting for? This was an Islamist terrorist act, and I'm sorry if it's inconvenient for Washington to face the facts, but there is no question about it. It was a terrorist act. It was committed by an Islamist. We knew he was an Islamist. The military did nothing about it out of political correctness. So, Bill, what am I missing?
He's shown in many ways that the worldview of Americans is very constrained and that they don't necessarily connect the dots when they're told something, when they hear something, when they read something. He's written at length on the fact that the media is in many ways used as an extension of power, and conscious or otherwise, and that people are influenced by what they hear or sometimes what they don't hear in the media.
He made an interesting argument in one of his papers in which he argued that propaganda is more insidious in the United States than it is in communist countries such as China, because in those countries, people there know that the media that they read, which is produced by the state, communist parties and that kind of thing, is biased. They already know that, so they take it with a big grain of salt. However, in America, a lot of people are under the belief that mass media produce content that is free of any kind of political influence or whatever, and Chomsky disagrees with that.
Well, I think it's his insight into how individuals, countries, corporations use language in exerting their influence, whether that's a corporation in an advertising sense or it's the U.S. government in the war on terror. Each has used language in a very powerful way, and he shows often in a very manipulative way. The symbolism of the Bush administration, the photos of him standing in front of a huge cross. Now, fine, he was a Christian speaking to Christians, but this was at a time when he's telling Muslims that this is not a war between Christianity and Islam. So the symbolism, the rhetoric, the language, the worldview is so completely different now and is seen so completely differently now.
Chomsky's theory, though, on propaganda in the media is relatively simplistic, because it basically argues that that linkage between elites and mass media workers and journalists, that it is a simple process through which those workers and journalists reproduce the ideology of those in Washington, D.C. I think it's more complex than that. And for me, I don't see the mass media as an institution that is incapable of really generating and producing content that can help challenging and disadvantaged groups achieve some of their goals in the system. I think the 20th century shows very clearly that media, while always a Johnny-come-lately on many issues, such as women's rights and civil rights, the media on many occasions during the 20th century helped eventually to legitimize those movements. And today we've seen dramatic changes for minorities and for women that would never have been there had the media not helped to legitimize those movements and give them press coverage.